Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Coffee with Kirsten. We're working our way through the corporate disciplines and we're close to the end of going through the disciplines. We only have 2 more after this. So today we're talking about worship. What is worship? How do I worship? Is there a correct way to worship? Should I have a choir? No choir? Electric guitars? Fog machines? How bright should the room be? Should I have no instruments at all? Should I only sing from the Psalms? Am I allowed to sing new songs? There is so many questions surrounding worship, and it is such a big topic. And so today we're going to just scratch the surface just a tiny bit on what worship looks like. Now, this is something that I have really been wrestling with over the past couple years because I grew up in a really small church. And it had a piano and an organ and a choir, and it was very traditional. We sung hymns and psalms, and I love that. It was really structured and formal, and that's kind of where I grew up. And then I went to Geneva. Now, Geneva is Reformed Presbyterian, and they believe in only singing the psalms. So they don't sing any other hymns or anything in worship. They just sing the psalms, and they don't use any instruments. It's all a cappella. So that was a huge culture shift for me. And then I started attending Christ Church. And Christ Church, we have 2 distinct forms of worship. We have our early service, which is our traditional blended service, and Pastor Marcus leads that, and he has a piano and a choir and sings a lot more hymns and psalms, but also incorporates some newer songs and things that aren't hymns. And then in our 11:15 service, Pastor Brad sings, and it's a lot more contemporary. It's darker, there's fog machines, electric guitars, and it's a lot more contemporary. But again, Brad also sings some hymns and some psalms. So, what is right worship? What does worship look like? I have worshiped in many different forms. Worship is hard to pinpoint, right? I believe that all of those worships forms are correct. There's no one right way to worship. And we're talking about corporate worship today. And you can also worship as an individual. And that looks a lot like what we talked about in the meditation and prayer episodes. So what is worship? The definition that I like most is the inner essence of worship is to know God truly as best we can and then respond from the heart to that knowledge by valuing God, treasuring God, prizing God, enjoying God, and being satisfied with God above all earthly things. And then that deep, restful joy and satisfaction in God overflows into acts. So, it's this heart response to our love and adoration for God. And so this isn't always a really happy thing. Sometimes worship looks like, God, I'm having the worst week of my life, but I'm thankful that you're there with me. Or, God, I acknowledge that this crappy thing is going on, but I'm thankful and I'm glad I have you. It's a lot of thankfulness and acknowledgement of everything that God is doing. So, in terms of that, what does corporate worship look like? Well, as I've already said, there's a lot of different forms that this can take. And there's no one right way to worship. We love to get stuck on the details of the room lighting and the fog and what right worship looks like. But there's no one right way to worship. Worship is a connecting of your spirit with God's spirit. So it's a very intimate thing. And if old hymns don't do that for you, then God's okay with you going to the contemporary service. He's not okay with you putting down other forms of worship because all of them are good to God. So for a long time, I really struggled with how to prepare myself and connect with worship. I am not a musical person. I am not in any way. I took guitar lessons, but I don't know. I can't sing. Pastor Marcus jokes with me about getting me on the choir, but it's never going to happen. So in terms of musically connecting with worship, I struggled a lot because I get really self-conscious, and then it becomes more about me panicking about people listening to me. And then at Christ Church, there's a lot of hand raisers and people moving their bodies, and that was not how we worshiped growing up. It was very formal. We stand up, but we don't move a lot. So this video is, how do we prepare for worship? How do we go into that space? What does it look like body posture wise? Hands up, hands down, like that kind of thing. Because this is practical. So we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty theology of worship, but how do we prepare ourselves to go into that space? So I'm going to talk about a traditional worship setting at church on, whenever you go in and you have your worship service and then your pastor gives a sermon, that kind of worship space. I, at Christ Church, would often get very overwhelmed because it's a bigger church, and there's a lot of things going on, and I struggled to slow down. So this is kind of how I prepare and get ready to enter into worship. So I have to be really intentional on Sundays about slowing down. There's a lot going on. I teach on Sunday mornings. There's youth group at night. And it's a busy, busy day for me. It's probably my busiest day of the week. But I like to go into worship a couple minutes early before the service starts and the countdown is on. And I love to sit by myself for worship and for Sunday morning. And a lot of people think I just don't have anyone to sit with. It's really funny when people come over and they're like, oh, you can come sit in our pew. But I love to sit by myself on Sunday mornings. I know that's not possible for everybody. But then I can take that 5 minutes and just and pause, and I drink my coffee, not in the sanctuary, and I just pause, and I am still and kind of go into that meditative state, because I'm preparing my heart to connect with God. So in those moments, I'm praying about things I'm thankful for, things that are going on, and I try to connect emotionally with where I'm at. So maybe it's a little bit of reflecting on what's gone on in my week. Maybe I've had a really bad week, and this is my space to kind of open myself up to that, to pause and to feel and to get ready to go into that space. Maybe this looks different for you, but definitely taking that time to prepare your heart, because worship is that connecting, that appreciation between you and God. So it's an intimate and emotionally charged thing. You also need to let go of individual distractions. So I have to turn my phone off. I have to not just put it on silent. I need to turn it off, put it in my backpack, put my backpack on the outside of the pew so I can't reach anything. Most of the time I don't even take a bulletin, because then I end up looking at it and reading it. I take away as many distractions as I can so that in those moments I'm engaged with God as best that I can be. I'm not always great at this. And sometimes I come to service and I'm like, this is the absolute last thing I want to do, but I'm going to try and remove as many distractions as I can. So that's kind of pre-service. What if you are just not feeling it that day? What if you come in and you are like, ugh, this is the absolute last thing I want to do, God. I don't want to sit here and worship. I'm not feeling it today. I'm not connecting with the music. The laundry list of things, and I think we've all been there. That's where the discipline of worship comes in. That's the literal sacrifice that you make in terms of worship, which Paul talks about. That's where the discipline comes in. And worship is creating that space to feel and be with God. So making sure that even if you're not in that correct worship attitude, saying, God, I'm not there today. I'm not, there's a lot else going on, but saying, I'm going to show up to worship, and I'm going to at least be here and just acknowledge that this time is your time, and I'm going to sacrifice sitting at home, which is what I really want to do, and just come and be present. That's what the sacrifice of worship looks like. And that's hard and it takes a lot. And it's difficult. But that's what the true sacrifice of worship looks like. Okay, so we've prepared our hearts. Now we get to the actual worship part. And I've talked about, this doesn't have to look like a certain way or be in a specific, formal, informal, whatever. That doesn't matter. What matters is that you connect with it. Worship should be emotional. It should be an intimate moment with you and God. And if you do that better with a formal, stylized, there's a lot of liturgy, there's hymns, there's psalms, then that's okay. That's great. If you connect better with contemporary music, that's great. Just find something that you connect with and you want to be with. This doesn't mean you should, church shop until you find the perfect worship band, because it's not the amount or how good the music is. It is how you connect with it. So for all those unmusically gifted people like myself, music is meant to give you a space to connect emotionally. And when we connect emotionally as a body of believers, amazing things happen. The songs, so the traditional way of worshiping is through songs and praise. And that is because the words of the songs give words and feelings, allow us to speak our emotions and our feelings and connect and get us to that place of worship through words as a collective body. I'm sorry, I keep scratching. It is allergy season. So worship should connect with you emotionally. Okay, so you're singing, and it's really important to sing and to not feel self-conscious about it. Because the moment that you feel self-conscious about it is the moment that worship is about you and not about God. And this is really hard for me because I am tone deaf. I'm constantly congested in my nose from allergies. I can't tell if I'm singing in pitch or not. I had to take a Psalms class in college with a whole bunch of choir kids, and that was humbling. But it's not about how good you sound. It is about you connecting with God and allowing yourself to realize this isn't about me, this is about God. Body posture, hands up, hands down, hands at the side. What's that all about? I don't think there's any one way to properly worship God. I think that you can do that with your hands up, with your hands down, kneeling, laying on the ground. But what is important is that you are doing it because God is moving you in that way. You shouldn't put your hands up because you're everyone else is, or you shouldn't be sitting there panicking the whole time like, oh, everyone else has their hands up around me, so I should have my hands up. That's when we move into the space again of worship being about you, not about focusing on God. So do what's comfortable. If you're not like a hand raiser, then that's fine. If you are, I'm happy for you. Maybe you love to move when you worship. I love to almost dance. And I do dance sometimes when I worship because I'm happy. My heart is singing gladness for God. So I like to move around a lot. So when I see kids dancing in the aisles, I love that. Jesus wants us to be like children, so move with worship. Don't feel like you have to be, it's this really somber experience. Come with that attitude that it's something special, but be willing to celebrate that joy out loud through your body. Your body is part of the worship experience. And ultimately, worship should change your heart, fill your spirit, and move you into a place of change. And it's that moment of transformation that allows you to move on to the next part of your day, and it should fill you up. So that's, the physical part of worship. There's so much more that I could say. I didn't realize how long I talked. So that's all I have on worship. Next time we will talk about guidance. I'll see you then.